Okay, am going to have to keep it down a little bit. I just woke up. I could not fall asleep, so I was just like, okay, I'm going to come down to my basement and record another video. But I am going to have to kind of keep it down so I don't wake anyone up. But yeah, I want to talk about Rick and Morty. So, this is a show that it's probably on its fifth or sixth season at this point, and it's generally like it kind of seems to have its niche fan base, and then people who hate it, who I generally get the impression haven't watched the show. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't lurk too much around those corners. Definitely not anymore. But I watched it for, well, I kind of was aware of it for a while, and I just you know like didn't get around to watching it, but I'd see like clips and stuff when it first aired. And I remember seeing the commercials and thinking, yeah, this looks pretty cool, but I sort of there were signs of stuff I didn't like in the show, and I ended up watching the first season, and then halfway through the second one, finally gave it a proper go, and that's about as far as I went. And I just did not. I think there's some cool stuff in the show, but for me, the bad really overrode the good. And I haven't heard too many people talk about this angle exactly, but uh, for me, it's what I can't stand about it is, you'll hear people say it's like a pretentious Reddit show and all that kind of stuff, and I don't know, I don't really get into all that, but I don't like how the show pushes like sentimentality and morality in a show that really feels like it's just sort of a very crude show, and it's very sadistic, and that stuff's fine, but balancing that with trying to be sentimental and trying to write stories about a family and them coming together and stuff. I've heard some people. So there's this video M. Lemon did on Rick and Morty, where he talks about that, and he's like, that was the strength of the show, and the show lost that. And to me, like, that was the biggest downfall of the show, is them trying to mix in all these sappy elements. And like, what I like about the show is just Rick and Morty going on wacky adventures, and Rick sort of abusing and persuading and manipulating Morty to do all this stuff for him. And just with that premise, to me, it's like, you can't, like, how do I put this? Like, when you watch different things, it's like different parts of your brain are activated, or it's like different, you know, you can't mix certain things. They just don't come together. Like, if I wanted a moral story about a family coming together, I would watch Andy Griffith or something. I'm not going to watch, like, frankly, I'm not going to watch many modern shows, especially not modern comedies. I mean, years and years ago, I used to watch Family Guy and Adult Swim, and now I don't know how I tolerated it, but back they would kind of try to do that stuff in Family Guy, though it was always kind of hard to tell how much of it was just the writers didn't care or how much of it was a joke. Even like they're just doing the sentimental stuff, but it's almost like as a, it's like a jab to the audience. And what was another show that did it? So you feel like growing up there'd be a few cartoons where you're just sort of there to watch funny shenanigans happen, and crude, crass stuff, or just funny stuff, and it's like they're trying to push the sappy stuff on you. And I don't mind a TV show with a good message. I mean, one of my favorite shows of all time is The Twilight Zone, the original one. And I just don't feel like you can blend certain things aren't supposed to go together. Like, it would be like trying to tell a morality story in porn. Like, you can't. It's just like these things don't don't go well together. These, it's like the appeals are totally different. And like I seen that like from day one when I watched when I seen the commercial for Rick and Morty where they're like science makes sense and family doesn't, and I'm like, oh boy, because I kind of liked the visuals of the show. I like the colors. For a little while I'd have Rick and Morty wallpapers, even though I didn't watch the show that much, just because I thought the visuals were kind of cool, and colors and that kind of thing, and character designs can really draw me in for a while. And that's another thing though altogether I hate is all the other family characters. I wish the show was just Rick and Morty and just like just those two going on adventures, and occasionally you would just see the mom and dad, like one clip per episode basically, and that's it, because I think those characters are just awful. And then the sister, I can't remember her name, but I can't stand her either. Yeah, just really most of the characters in that show I think are terrible. But the sad thing is, I think the core idea, I think there's potential for it. I think it can be funny. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there were a few moments in the show that, really funny. I have some other complaints with it where just it feels like like an edgy liberal nerd screaming at the world. When I would see stuff like what's the one episode that ends with them all buff and they're beating up the Nazis and all these other stereotypically bad people. One, I'm like, that isn't in character. Like Rick Sanchez is this terrible guy. He's absolutely awful. So it starts to feel like a writer insert thing when you have him was beating up the guys we all agree are really bad. It's like, I have a hard time believing Rick Sanchez would have a huge problem with these people. And if he did, it would probably be for some off-the-wall reason. Something we, don't really, that most people really wouldn't care about that much. Yeah, so there'd just be little things like that where it's like, this feels really juvenile and dumb. It's like, what's the point of this? Like, it feels like what's that one clip that with Fat Albert where he from the old cartoon where he beats up the Nazi, and like we all laugh at that, like it's like, well, that's stupid, that's corny, but it's like Rick and Morty just kind of does the same thing, but it's supposed to be like, oh yeah, this is like cool and or whatever, and it's like, this is embarrassing, this is awful. I think some of the humor's just, it's too much millennial kind of humor where it's like, look how self-aware we are, and I just don't think that's funny. I don't think it's clever. The visual style, like I said, there's a lot I like about it, but I also think, like a lot of modern cartoons, it's just sort of underutilized, where it's like they don't really use the potential of the animated medium. Whereas I would say Ren and Stimpy is the show for me that fully utilizes it, where it's like, they do everything they can with those character designs. And I guess speaking of shows, Ren and Stimpy to me, when I talk about Ren and Stimpy, I mean the first two seasons, the ones with John Kay. I never watched the other ones, I just never got around to it. And like those two seasons to me are like pure TV. Like there's no spin, they're not trying to push any sentimentality. When they are in the episode with Stimpy's fart, it's done in like the best way possible, where it's clearly a jab at the network and a jab at those kind of stories, and he just does it in the most irreverent way possible. But at the same time, ironically makes a story that probably has one of the most relatable depression scenes ever, a lot better than any of the things Rick and Morty ever did. And yeah, Ren and Stimpy is an example of a show to me that's just like pure. That guy wasn't trying to force his ideology or do any cringy crap in there. He was just like, he just made something, and the characters are as demented as they are meant to be, and it's a good. I could go on a whole rant with Ren and Stimpy because obviously it went off the rails with what I've seen of adult party cartoon is awful and all that. But yeah, basically, Rick and Morty to me is like there's some good in there. It's funny at times, but it's just all the hype over it. I'm like, man, I feel like this is really hinging on like a very like the concept and the voices and a few funny things, but overall, it's just not that good of a show. Now, mind you, I don't watch much TV altogether. I really don't. But when the show first came out, I did watch at very least more adult cartoons, and I guess compared to the competition, it was better. That's always something. Anytime you're watching something, and it's like you're sort of wondering why this is so popular. It's like, okay, well, what does it have to compete with? And sometimes if you suffer through some of the really bad stuff for a while, and then you watch that one thing that people rave about, you start to understand why it's more popular. It's like if you have to work in a warehouse and that one pop song that's better than all the rest comes on the radio and you end up liking it. But if you had your choice, it isn't that much better. Not all pop music's terrible, but I don't know. That's about. I guess I wanted to get that across because I don't hear many people mention that with Rick and Morty, and most people that do they sort of come at it from the angle of like that sentimental stuff's like a good part of the show, and I just feel like it's not. It's what ruins the show, and I don't feel like a show like that with the characters it has. It's like that's not the vehicle for those kinds of stories. And I could probably talk even longer, but I'm going to wrap things up here.